are listening to Setting History Straight with Linda Watson on Hebrew Nation Radio.
Okay, so we're sitting at the end time, and the Father has mentioned many nations in prophecy, but we don't know who those nations are. Many of us don't know who those nations are, so we need to identify those so we know what happens at the end time. And one of the ways that we can do that is with DNA. We have so much information now from archaeology, from DNA, from history, that we can actually piece together and find out who the nations are that are talked about in prophecy. So that's what we want to cover today. We're going to cover the DNA piece of this. Okay, so before we begin, for people who are new, I teach that the 12 tribes of Israel went into Europe out of the Middle East, and they came to America and many other of the Christian nations. I also teach that many of the legends that are talked about were actual real history that has been left out. So for new people, if you want to go to my website, which is 12tribehistory.com, you could study this, and that'll give you a good background for what we're covering today. They're tracing all this ancestry back, and I'm going to show you the history using this DNA. And it's just incredible stuff. All right, so we'll start first. This is a map, obviously, of Europe. And notice that this is the DNA for Europe, R1b. That would be the Germanic tribes. The Germanic tribes would be R1b. I'm going to talk about Anna. And then you had Russia here, which is R1a. They look very similar to us, and they're in the same regions. How they decide to name these things, I'm not sure, but R1A is going to link back to Russia and Meshach and Tubal. So this would be the Germanic tribes. You would see R1B was the Germanic tribes. The R1A is Russia. Now that is Tubal and Meshach. Now, how do we know that? Because when we studied the history that Josephus had written about these people that lived in this region of Russia, this western side of Russia, right? That particular region, he said that was Meshach and Tubal. He wrote that in his history. So he would have lived, Josephus, and not only Josephus, we also had Herodotus that wrote the same thing. So that's two witnesses right there. Then you had some others come down the pipe, but we covered that in a program that we did on the history of Russia. And so that's where these people are. And we're going to try and identify many of the tribes that are listed in Genesis 10, which is the table of nations. And now it's going to be really interesting. This stuff is just going to lay out here like you're not going to believe it. I mean, as I would go in and look for this stuff in the encyclopedias, it was just all there, because the people now, like I said, have done all the research and they know who these people are and where they came from. Now, if you look at this little map here, this is Russia. You can see Russia here. Belarus would be right in this area. Then you would have the Ukraine. Then you'd have Poland over here. This, like right here, looks like Czechoslovakia. This right here looks like the Slova on that. But down in this area where it says I, all of that is Slavic area. Those are Slavic people. They're not the same as the Russians. You know, Slavic is a language, yes, and that's what when they refer to Slavic, a lot of times they're talking about the languages, right? But this is the actual people that came out of the area over here next to the Ural mountain range, and they came in and settled in that area. Now, remember the history of in Europe, the Sarmatians tribe that came out also from over here was a tribe. We were told by Herodotus they were the tribe called Meshach. And they pushed, that was the people that pushed the Germanic tribes out of the area of the Ukraine, because they had been living in the area of the Ukraine for many, many years. They pushed them into Western Europe. That's why they began to migrate, is because of the Sarmatians, which was, according to Herodotus, was Meshach. This stuff couldn't make it up if I wanted to. Now, Gog, I finally found out who China is. China is Gog and Magog. Okay, that is who it is. I'm going to show you. This is what the historians have written about her throughout the centuries. These are the accounts. There's probably more. They represent China, and Gog and Magog represent China. Now, when you get to Ezekiel 38, where it lists all these nations that come against Israel, you know that Gog is mentioned as a prince. So he's talked about as a prince, okay? But they were actual, still that Gog and Magog were actual tribes. Now, the Mongol, which where we get Mongolia, right, is derived, appears to be directly derived from the word Magog. Now, how interesting is that? Now, the Arabs wrote quite a bit about this, and they said in their writings, which was the Quran, they wrote that the Tartars right here, which are the people that are in Russia, they call the Tartars. The Tatars are the people that are in Russia that are Siberian type of nationalities. They said they represented Gog and Magog. They said they're associating. And remember, Scythia is just the area where all the tribes went. That's just the area. That's just the name of it. That's like saying America and then all these people coming in, okay? But they also wrote in the Quran that the Great Wall of China was originally called the Wall of Magog. Now, this is written in the Quran and written into some of their Arab writings, and they're recording that they are saying that China, you see, would be associated with Gog and Magog. 13th century, Marco Polo, he said he knew that the Mongols were descendants of Magog. He further understood the names of Yuk and Magog in China was to be Gog and Magog. So here's a third reference. But this last reference, I think, is the most interesting. This was Alexander the Great. I'm going to read this whole thing here. After his journey to the land of the rising sun, Alexander traveled northward through Armenia, and he asked the natives, "Who are the nations within these mountains upon which you are looking?" And they replied, "These are the Huns, and they are the kings of Gog and Magog." Upon hearing this description of these savage, cruel people, he ordered a gate to be built. He ordered a gate to be built in the mountain range in the gap to keep the people of China from coming in and out of that area. So it was an iron gate that he built. And so I thought that was really interesting that there's 4 references right here in history now that show that Gog and Magog is linked to China. Okay, so that's, that was a missing piece for me because I kept looking for this information, and all I'd ever get was the religious people that didn't really study this. And so, and they had all kinds of thoughts, So this is what I'm talking about here. Notice right here where it says, oh, that's an entire family line. It goes into Japan and Korea and all of these places along this, along into the area of China. All of this is the family of O, DNA, family of O. This right here, C, is going to be Mongolia, okay? So we're beginning to see what some of these people are and their family names. And notice how the DNA is just tying everybody together. And I don't know if we need to, here's Belarus, some of these places. Now, these nations right here, Finland, Estonia, Lithuania, all of these are very similar in nationalities, and they really don't link to anybody. They're separate nationalities. We're going to get to them. And of course, the Germanic tribes would have been on this side, which we were talking about. Now we're going to get more into the Germanic tribes now. Now let's start with the Germanic tribes and the Vikings. If you remember, the Vikings were up in the area of Norway and Sweden and down. All of these people are considered the people that we refer to as the Vikings. And the Vikings would move into Britain. Now notice how they moved into Britain exactly the way history says they did. That they came out of this area of the Scandinavian countries as the Vikings around the 8th century, and they moved themselves into Britain. Do y'all see that? But they also moved into Britain up here into the area of Scotland. Do y'all see that also? And they were heavily on the island of Iceland. So you can see that they were in Iceland, and you'll see little patches of them in different places. But I just think that's interesting. Now, this right here, I think is very interesting. And this is the people that are I-1. They are Israelites. I believe they were Israelites. Now notice what history says about this. I'm going to read that. This is the Nordic people in Europe, but they were there before. They were there before the R1A1s came in. Do y'all see that they're saying these were already here? And they call it the Nordic Bronze Age. But these guys, they're so interested in trying to link everything back to, evolution, that they'll say, oh, they were there 10,000 years ago. They were there 35,000 years ago, which we know is just not true. Because we know that these people, now notice it says this Nordic Bronze Age maintained closed trade links with the Mycenaean Greeks, with whom it shared several striking resemblances or similarities. They're the same people. So these people, see that these people here that are the I-1s that are located right in this area, these people right here were, see, there used to be a river that flowed down the middle of Europe. So they would come down this river and they could come down to Greece, where the Mycenaeans were, which we know was the tribe of Dan, because tribe of Dan was the first ones that went into Greece, and they would trade with them. It may have been that it's these people up here were the tribe of Dan. I don't know, but they were definitely Israelites.
Quick question. Am I remembering correctly that some of Dan actually either left Egypt before or didn't go with the other tribes and went to Greece from there?
Yeah, they went with the Trojan kings.
Yeah.
They went with the Trojan kings about the same time the Trojan kings went in that area of Greece. See, these people were probably already up in this region way before, probably during the time they may have left out and went up there before the Exodus. They may have left out before that time frame, because they certainly aren't giving us correct time frames when they tell us that these people were up there for 10,000 years ago. So they're not giving us correct time frames. And so we know what we do know about them. I'm thinking they are Dan. Remember, there was a verse in Joshua that says, Dan, why are you still in ships? The tribe of Dan wasn't able to take over some of their territory in the Middle East, and they went into Greece. And we know that they went into Greece. And then they eventually would become the Teutodanans, and you can read about this in Stephen Collins's books. And they went into the area of Ireland from there. And that's where the tribe of Dan stayed, was in the area of Ireland. The people who are the Irish people today are the tribe of Dan. So interesting stuff. But notice how these guys right here, you know, they came in earlier, and so they call them pro-Europeans. Do y'all see that? Northern pro-Europeans. So they're the same people, but they came in at an earlier time. And they called them the Nordic people, and they said they were closely associated and looked very similar to the people that were in Greece at that time. Now, how interesting is that? Now, the Sami, do y'all see Sami up here? Those people are dark native people. They're dark native people, the Sami. And they lived at the top. You know, if you remember the story of Joshua, that he was told to drive all the Canaanites out of the land of Israel. He was told to drive them all out. And the Welsh history picks up on that. And the Welsh history tells us that the mighty Hugh, now they called him the mighty Hugh because his name was Joshua. Normally people would call him Joshua, but they didn't pronounce it with a J, they pronounced it with an H. So that's why they're calling him the mighty Hugh. Okay, it says the mighty Hugh brought the original Celtic people into England. So that's what the Welsh Chronicles actually covers, and they say that. And at that same time, it mentions how the mighty Hugh was pushing the Canaanites out of the region. And so this is maybe where some of these people migrated, was up here in this area, because the Canaanites were one of the sons of Ham, you'll remember. So interesting stuff, basically all of it. But notice how it shows how they migrated in here. Isn't that interesting? That history is just backing up every bit of this. Now this is Britain. And you know the Anglo-Saxons come in around 410, because that was the time that Rome had fallen, and then the armies that were in England at that time, which were Roman armies, they moved themselves out to protect the empire. And so when they did, here comes the Anglo-Saxons in here with them. And the Frisians would have been the Dutch. So some of these people began to migrate in here. Now notice the languages here. This is showing you the old Anglo-Saxon language would have been on the east side of Britain. This is the old ancient area, which is where the Celtics were. They would have been on the western side of Britain. Now, this is what I think is so fascinating. Remember how I tell y'all all the time that the people who were the Scotch-Irish people came out of the top of Ireland, and they moved themselves into Scotland? You know how I tell you that? Notice this map here. It says Scotch-Irish start moving out at 550. 550 AD. They began to migrate themselves. Notice they have the same language. They have the same language. And interesting that it proves the point that the Irish people that were really probably, you know, some of the original Milesian people that came into that area probably lived up in this region, and they moved themselves up into all of this area of Scotland. Now you see the Picts right here. In the 8th century, these people just disappeared off the map. We don't know where they went. But by that time, you know, you had quite a bit of migration of these people, which are the Scotch-Irish, into that area. They began to really migrate heavily into that area. And I think the Picts probably felt like they would just needed to leave. And I really don't know who the Picts are. You know, I've never really studied them to find out who they are. But see, do you see how history is just backing up? I mean, all this bloodline stuff, it's just backing up history like crazy. And these are languages here. And this is showing you a map, you know, of 450, for the 4th century, really. And how they're already beginning to migrate themselves into Scotland and coming out of Ireland. And they did this for years. And this area would have been called Ulster. And Ulster, it has the flag with the hand on it that has the string tied around it. It's a red hand, remember that? Which is the sign of Zerah. We know that that's the sign of 0. Now, watch this. This is amazing. Let's start with, let's see, who do we want to start with first? These I2B, which you'll notice they have a dark line. They're coming down. They're migrating themselves. It looks like mainly from the Middle East, how they migrated up into Scandinavia. That's how they got there. How interesting is that? So they may have lived in some of these regions and just continued to migrate themselves up into Scandinavian countries. Now notice how the tribes have now started moving themselves. You notice that you have a line coming here, moving into Armenia. That would have happened when Parthia fell. These people that were the Germanic tribes would have followed this, and they would have they would have been in the area of Scythia. They would have followed this area and come into Armenia. Look at that. And then it shows how they came from there and they went all the way down into Western Europe. And then they went all the way down into Spain and then covered all the way up into Western Europe. Do y'all see this? Is this not amazing? I think it's amazing. And so now you have another line still that's coming from that same area over here, which have been right around that area we call Scythia. They're coming out of that area and they're moving themselves up. Notice they're moving themselves up and coming again down into Europe. And so now you notice here, look at some of the lines that are coming out from around here. People that are moving themselves out of this area, which is the Middle East. Look how they're moving out of the Middle East this way. They would have been moving themselves out of the Middle East when Joshua came in, because Joshua would have pushed all these people out. Now there's a stele that's in the top of Africa, North Africa, that says, we left our homeland because we were pushed out by Joshua the thief. So it's really interesting because these people, you see how they're migrating out of the Middle East and they're moving themselves into North Africa. That would have probably been some of those tribes that were in that area that when the Israelites started taking over that area, they pushed some of these people out. Okay, so let's go to this one. This is the American Indians. Boy, this is interesting. Like I said, I believe that Joshua pushed some of these people out and they would settle in this area, which we call Kadistan. This is the area which you see C here. C is this area that we're talking about. Now watch what they say about this area called C. It's just to the left of the Caspian Sea. Just to the right of the Caspian Sea. Do y'all see that? It's more into Central Asia. And you also have this Q here. They have a group that's Q just in that same region. And Greenland has a Q. Now watch this. This is what they say about C. It says C is found in northeastern Asia, including Siberia. So you find people from Siberia into this area and in the Americas. Now the C says these people were around the Arctic Siberian area. That, according to scripture, would have been Tagoma. Tagoma lived in the northern parts. We're told that in Ezekiel chapter 38. Now notice it says here, I'm trying to read it. It says, these are the indigenous people of the Americas. This is the native Indians. They came out of this area right here. I believe that some of these people got pushed out of the Middle East and they settled into that area. I think Joshua was cleaning house. You know, he pushed some of those people out into that area. He also pushed a different group. Now watch this Q group. The Q group, Native Americans in Central Asia and Northern Siberia. So some of these people that are in the Q group, they would have been in Central Asia and Northern Siberia, the same place we talked about that's the same family, although they're listed as C. And I don't know how they categorize these things, but we can actually see who they are, and they're associating both of these groups, the Q and the C, with the American Indians. Do you notice this is a picture of native from Alaska? These are the Sami people, which are located in the top of the area we call the Arctic region, which would have been up there in the top of Finland and Sweden. And this is a Lap. He would have been in the northern part also. He would have been in that same area. Look how the similarity of these people. Now, Kazakhstan is the place that this region where these native people came out of. This is where the American Indians came from. I mean, it's just so incredible. Now, watch the route here. Okay, so they would have been over here somewhere in, I would guess right in this area somewhere. And then they would have traveled, it showed they traveled up this route. They probably are right in this area. That's what it's hard for me to tell, but it's Central Asia. And then they would have traveled this route. Notice how they traveled all the way up here into the northern Siberian area. That's why you find them there in northern Siberia. Come across the land bridge, which this would have been probably closer than it is now. It may have actually been connected back then, I don't know. And notice how they traveled all the way down here, all the way down America and into South America. How interesting is that? I mean, and they can tell all this by DNA now. They can tell all this. So this is just fascinating to me that you see C here. You see C as one of the areas. C came over here and settled more in this area. Now notice some of the people from Q, which was in Greenland, wound up down here in Australia and in this area right in here. This is fascinating to me. All right, now we're going to get to the Mediterranean Sea, okay? The Mediterranean Sea. These people right in this area in the Mediterranean Sea, notice how they all have the same color. They are called J2 family group. That means they will all have similarities in DNA enough to group them together under one name. That would be Greece. Y'all see Greece at the bottom here? Parts of Turkey, not all of Turkey, but parts of Turkey, and Israel. And they didn't show it here, but it's also going to be some of these islands here. Now let's bring this up here. This is the J1, and this is J1. It says this is northern Syria. The J1 would have been down here. That would include eastern Turkey and northern Iraq. Many of those people would have been people of Ishmael, Esau, some of the other families of Abraham. That would have been J1 down here. Do y'all see that? They would have been in this area here where it says J1, Ishmael, and that's not hard. They know that. They know they're the descendants of Abraham. They know that, okay? Now, here's J2. J2 would have been this area that we were talking about. That is the island of Cyprus. The island of Crete is right down here underneath Greece. Then you had Malta, you had Sardinia, and you see some of these areas of even into Croatia also would be J2. Now that group has a different kind of family that we're going to talk about. Now I need to show you that these two islands and this island should also have a group, should be J2. They're listing, you see Sardinia, and they're listing, what is it, Sicily? Sicily is one of these islands, and they're all tied into the family of J2, along with Israel. So these are considered Mediterranean people. They fall into that family. Israel is not falling into the family of the R1b, which is the ones that are in the Germanic tribes. Just want to point that out. Now, this is what Josephus wrote. He said was the ancestor of the Greeks. Now, Javan, now it says Gomer's son of Japheth was the first to settle in Italy in the 10th year of Nimrod following the dispersion. This is history that they claim that was written that said that Gomer's son moved himself into Italy in the 10th year of Nimrod. So that would have been at an early time that this was actually being recorded. They claimed that they had Babylonian records, and very interesting, tying the Greeks back to that same family line. We're going to see that family line. All right, here's the sons of Javan would have been, do y'all see these Tarshish, the Kittim? Kittim is another name for Cyprus. Okay, that's actually mentioned in scripture because this island, which is Cyprus, was ruled, we know in history, was ruled by one of the descendants of Esau. So that's why you see it mentioned. And in Josephus's time, he said all the islands in the Mediterranean Sea were considered Chittim. So Chittim would have been Cyprus, but it was ruled by Esau. We heard of Tarshish many times. It's talked about in scripture. It's at the very bottom of Spain. It was like a port area, maybe a small little land area in Spain. And so do y'all see how these are linking the sons of Japheth to these islands? Not all of them are going to be, but many of these islands are going to be sons of Javan. And they would have been Greece. How interesting is this? Now you'll notice the colors. Notice the colors here. Look at this. Same colors. Some of them in Greece. And you see, you would have had some of that same stuff right over here in this area. They look like they're almost in the family line of J2. They are in the family line of J2. Now, just so that you see, South Italy would have been different than Northern Italy. Northern Italy would have been Israelite. That's R1b. Okay, that would have been Germanic tribes. Sicily and Sardinia all are from Javan. All right, all of those are Javan's children. How interesting. That's not all of them. Okay, now here's the account. You have Mizraim, and it's lists all his children in verse 10:13 of Genesis. Then 10:14 talks about that there was one of his children that was the Philistines. So the Philistines would have came from the line of Mizraim. Mizraim was the tribe that was in Egypt. Interesting, because this is the history on the Philistines. The book of Amos actually talks about this. It says that the Philistines came out of an island called Caphor, C-A-P-H-O-R. And if you look that island up, you can see it right here. That's so interesting. Can you see that? It says they came from Caphor. Now, that probably means that it has to be one of these two islands over here, which is Sardinia or Sicily, because the historical account and the archaeology says the Philistines, the people of the Philistines, are linked back to islands in the east side of the Mediterranean Sea. It said their homeland was an island. It was in the eastern side. That's why I always keep saying that the people from Sicily, I think, are really, truly, probably date back to the Philistines. And so, and you can see them in at the very tip of southern Italy. So they would have moved themselves into southern Italy. They would have been probably, you see, you have little pockets of them here. And then, but right up here is the R1. So there's a difference between the people in northern Italy, which were the tribes, Germanic tribes, and the nationalities in the southern part of Italy. Do y'all see that? There was differences. And so another proof, we want to talk about the other families of Japheth. See, here's the islands that we've talked about here. Here's Cyprus, the island of Crete. Remember, that was the very first island that when the first settlements of the Trojan kings went into Crete first before they went into Greece. And then they settled in this area right here. This is what's called the Messenic region. But right up in this area here, right in that area is where the city of Troy was. And so just fascinating stuff. But one of these islands over here had to be belonging to the Philistines, according to archaeology and according to history. Because the archaeologists said we can link these people that are the Philistines back to some of these islands in Italy. And so how interesting is that? See, they know all this stuff now because they've got archaeology going on. They've got all this DNA being tested now, so they know all this information. Now, one of the other sons that was mentioned there as, let's see, let's go back there. Son of Javan is Dodanum. And Dodanum was, according to history, Macedonia. Now, we all know the history of Macedonia. They kept saying, we're not the Greeks. We are not the Greeks. They kept saying that over and over again. We are not the Greeks. Macedonia was the area that Alexander the Great came from. His daddy was one of the early founders of Macedonia. And so it's over to the side of Greece. It was in that area, but over to the side. And they claimed that these people called the Dodanums were the Macedonians. How interesting is that? Tying all of these people. Now here's Trace right here. Do y'all see Trace right here? He was one of the sons of Japheth. Yeah, because he was Tiras, Tyrus. And so they can link all that back to those ancient maps. Now, we're going to get to the Kurds. And the Kurds have kept up with their ancestry. They absolutely tell you they were the Medes. Now, remember, you had the Persians who were Iran, and they tell you today that they are Persia. And you had the Medes, and those are the Kurds. They live in the eastern part of Turkey. This is the area right here. They would be from this family called Medea. Medea was one of the sons of Japheth. So this is where they are. And then Tagoma, the Turks were Tagoma, and they lived in this area. They came out of that, like I said before, they would have come out of the Siberian area. They come out of the Siberian area and they move themselves down eventually into Turkey. And they are the Turks. So interesting, I'm going to go through this history here. The sons of Japheth was Gomer, Magog, Medea, Javan, Tubal, Meshach, and Tyrus. We've covered all of those now. And then the sons of Javan, we mentioned all of these. These were the people in the islands in the Mediterranean Sea. Now, let's look at some of this history. It says Bible scholars have generally identified Medea with the Iranian Medes of much later records. The Medes reckoned to be the offspring by Josephus, and subsequent writers were also called Medea. Here, and then it says the book of Jubilees actually backs this up. And it says that Medea married one of the daughters of Shem, and he wanted to inherit the area around beyond the Black Sea, and so he asked for permission. This is all written in the books of Jubilee. So, you know, it's so interesting now to see some of this. Now, just so you can see it here, Here's Medea, which is the area of Meda, and that's was in the old ancient maps. This would have been Persia down here. You see, these people were in the Middle East, and now you can see that this is where the Turks came from. This is the upper part of China. The Turks came out of this, they migrated into this area one way or the other. They were up there, okay? And so Josephus identifies Togoma as the Physians. The Physians are right here. All right, so he's saying that's Togoma. See, that would have been the same people that tribes of Dan were fighting with when they came in. When they came in, they fought the Physians, which they were right here in this same area. These are all the same people. They're all Togoma. And they moved into Armenia. So Togomas existed in the geographical region of Turkey and Armenia today. So that's where some of these guys are for Togoma. But they are also Turks, and they would have also be in the top of Siberia, because we still have Turks in the top of in the Russian Empire called the Tartans. Tartans. That's the name of those people. Now you see how they were here in the top of Russia. All right, wow, this map is crazy here. So so these people we've talked about, the Iwans would have been the original people that probably settled. They came out of the Middle East. They probably didn't want to have anything to do with Moses and all of the Israelites. And they could have been the tribe of Dan, who knows, but they moved themselves, like we said, up into this area right here. And they are Nordic people, okay? Now, we also talked about Russia, but we didn't talk about these areas right here, which are really interesting. Let's get to these. In 1B, which you see right up here in the top part of Russia, is where the Ashkenazi Jews came from. It's identified as one of the 4 Ashkenazi Jew founder lineages. Look at that. This is the area that they were, and that's why so many Jews came out of Russia, because you had these pockets there. All right, and now in 1, there's another whole group of people. Let's bring that one up. The N1 are the people that were in Finland. They make up 61% of Finland. You had the Lapps, which we already talked about, Estonia, Lithuanians, and Northern Russia. All of these areas. Now, remember, I've told you that these tribes right here, these Estonia and Lithuania and all of these tribes, they are going to be in that same region, and they're different from the other tribes. They're different. They have a different bloodline. They had a different DNA grouping. I don't know who they actually are, but they are all of the same people, and they tend to want to link them in to the top part of Russia. So I don't really know who they are. I do know the Lapps, I believe, probably were some of the Canaanites, because they look very similar. And some of these people were being in northern Russia. So G would have been the Armenians, and they would have been also in Iran, it said. So that tribe of G was a totally different line. E is an African tribe. It would have come out of northern Africa. Now this right here is Slavic. You see where it says I2A, that's the Slavic people right here. Just like we know that that's where they landed, right in this area right here. Now, I love this map because this really shows all the migrations of people. Now notice how these guys really want to get off into their evolution and tell you the years, and they're just so wrong. They're just so wrong. I mean, they just are. So notice how it looks like you had this. Let's start with Africa first. You can see this, there was this hub area right in here. This may have been where Noah came and took some of his people and brought them to different areas. They may have brought them that area. and you see that they began to move themselves up into the northern Africa, more to the western side. And then some of them started moving themselves. You can see some of them started moving themselves out of Africa and into India. Notice how some of them came into India. Do y'all see that? Now you see all of these people right in this region here. This is the place where Noah came in. And all of these people now, do you see how they can tell with the DNA that after they landed here on Mount Ararat, which is that area that was in Turkey, that this is the area that we believe that Noah had landed. Look how all the tribes get dispersed from there. I mean, it's just amazing to me that all these tribes are getting dispersed from this one region right here. And this also looks like it includes part of Israel. They're coming out of the Middle East. They're coming out of that same area we talked about. And they're beginning to migrate everywhere. And then now, if you look at India, and then look how some of them migrated into China, and it looks like they may have gone into these islands down here below China, and then eventually migrated themselves up. Do y'all see that? Then you have some people going from there all the way up. You have some people going down into Australia. Then you got some people going over here to this island. All of this is tying all these people, all of these people together, their pathways. It's showing their pathways and how they traveled and how they eventually got to the places where they are. I just think it's so fascinating when you see that, because man, this is just proving what the Bible has always said. Now, these are the actual populations, and this whole thing is because of migration of people. So you don't have one tribe just totally in one country. You have many tribes in many countries, especially in Europe. But you can see how Europe is predominantly R1b on all of these islands here, just about. And you can see all of these places here with R1b, everything's R1b on the western side of Europe. It's a little different when you get up here, because here you have some of the original people in here. And now you've got some Russian, because the Russian is gonna be that R1a. So you're gonna have some Russian people in here. But these tribes right here, the tribes of Finland, Estonia, all the way down to Lithuania, many of those are very, very similar. So whatever this N1 is, whoever those people are, that's who they're associated with. But you see, this is caused by war. Many people migrate out because of wars. They move to other areas. There's a lot of reasons why they move, trade, jobs, whatever, and live in other areas. But they're predominantly, you can see what the predominant distinctions are for these people in each one of these countries. Now, this, like we said before, is the actual map of China. Notice how all of these people are in the family of O. All the way down into the islands, they're all O. Everybody's O. And then when you get to the top up here, this is the Mongolians, the C3. This is the tribe that these are the people that the American Indians came out of, the C, the Mongolians, okay? And so then you have the Turks up here in that region. And these are the people that would eventually migrate themselves down into Turkey. That's who the Ottoman Empire was. They came out of this region here. The Mongolians, these are the people that were associated with Attila the Hun and some of the other hordes that come into Europe during that early times. So you see that. Now notice this is the area around Tibet It's totally different. It has a D1 line, D3 line. And it looks like that one came really out of Africa, but it's not the same people. It is not the same people that are in this area that we are referring to as the family of O, which is probably China and Japan, very similar. Very similar. Now, we also know Japan claims that their descendants came out of Korea. I didn't get a chance to research at all H, which would have been India, but they are a separate tribe. I don't know where they originated. I don't know which family it originated from because I didn't get a chance to study them. But you can see some of these same peoples down here. Here's C and C up here. So these people in the Siberian northern part of Russia were the Mongolians and the Turks. That's who they are. Very interesting. They would have been the people that migrated out and went into America. You know, just really interesting stuff. See, here's another C area right here that we were talking about here. And here's Africa. Now, here's the tribes of Africa we talked about were Cush and Mizraim and Put and Cana. Cana, you know, was in this area up here, the Canaanites. Yeah, they would have been in the area where Israel was. They would have been pushed out. I think some of those people are the ones we're talking about. Notice this is the family of E over here in this area. Mizraim, we have been told that those people were in Egypt. All right, so Put was on the western side of Africa. You see, they may have come out from here. You see, they have E, but they also have A. But then there's one little tribe right here that's an Israelite tribe. I didn't look it up to find out what it was, but it's one little tribe that's DNA is Israelite. That's really a Germanic tribe. How interesting. Then you see E coming out here and moving on up. They're going to be moving themselves over into the area of Central Asia. And B, some of those people are moving out. And A, they moved down and then they moved over to they probably are the tribe of Put. So this is where some of them are now. Cush was also, remember, he was the original king of Egypt, we believe, from Dodorius. Dodorius, when he wrote in the 1st century, he talked about Osiris was the king of Egypt. Well, Osiris would have been Nimrod, because you had Osiris and you had Isis, and that Isis was his queen. We know that history. We know that those are the names for Nimrod and Semiramis. And they changed names into different countries, but yes, that's who they are. So now this is South America. This is many, you can notice some of these tribes came out of Africa. You know, so you see them located here coming down, and then this would have been some of the native tribes coming in here. Now, if we had the top part of South America, you would have seen more Spanish influence. But interesting stuff. You see, C would have been some of those tribes we were talking about that came out of that area that we call Mongolia. And then B, the B tribes are from Africa. D, so that's really it. And so this pretty much is the scriptures that we had that we talked about earlier. Sons of man, set your face against Gog, the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. We proved now that's in Russia. And behold, I am against thee, O Gog, chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. Meshech and Tubal is Russia. So he is, this Gog, who is going to be in charge of this war, is going to come out of Russia, turn thee back, and put hooks in your jaws, and I will bring, this is the end result, and will bring thee and any armies and horsemen and all of them of all sorts of armor, and a great army company with bucklers and shields, and all of them handling swords. Now, verse 5, Persia, Ethiopia, those are African nations, Libya, all of them wearing, so they're going to be with them. Gomer, this would have been some of those areas we talked about earlier, which would have been in that area we call Central Asia and into the Mediterranean Sea area. And Tagoma out of the northern quarters. See, Tagoma was in the northern quarters and all her bands and many people with her. So these are the people that come against the unwalled cities of Israel that Ezekiel 38 talks about. So now through history and DNA, you can see where these people are and who they were.
For more information about this broadcast, please visit our website at www.12tribehistory.com. That is the number 12, tribehistory.com, or email us at lwatson44@cox.net with any questions or comments.